Yeah, there we go. Okay, great. We're going to call the meeting to order. Good afternoon and welcome to the Curriculum Committee meeting of October 17th, 2017. Introductions and administrative remarks.
Thank you very much. Okay, so tonight on our agenda, we're going to talk briefly about the comprehensive plan. That is an action item that we plan to move to the board business meeting for approval and signature. We're going to talk about the Rothman survey that you will also be asked to move to the consent agenda. We hope to have 3 audit reports tonight, one from theater, one from gifted, and one from English language arts, and you have copies of those PowerPoints. And then we have a few board agenda items, which include continuing clubs, proposed clubs, and a few student trips that are in your packet, and we will also be identifying those as action items that will move to the board business agenda. Next month, you have a lot to look forward to. We have our annual data portfolio coming out, and we will also have our annual data highlights reports from our principals from the 5 buildings, so that will also be a chock-full meeting. One reminder, we have our technology focus groups for parents coming up this Thursday. There will be one at 10 a.m., and there will be another one at 6 p.m. They will both be at the high school, and we will be sending out a school messenger text message to remind parents, but there have been several reminders in the Redner Reader and some other places like that, so we really hope to have a great turnout as we continue our work with the technology study.
And Maureen, if we could just note that the next month's curriculum meeting, we did change the date for that meeting.
Yes.
So we're going to move that meeting to, that'll be on November 28th instead of the 21st. So we'll be moving that to the 28th before the business meeting. And as of now, we have it listed as 5 o'clock, but we will talk in leadership. We might actually move that up to 4:30, just looking at all that's on that agenda.
Yeah, and that would be at the Township Building.
Correct.
It would not be here.
Yes. And we'll advertise that and post that, but just wanted
Okay.
to.
I thought finance was going to that.
No, finance will go to the Tuesday meeting. We'll go to the GRCC slot for that month in November. So finance will move. It is on that calendar in your packet. So finance will take GRCC, but curriculum will be moved to before the business meeting.
Okay, we'll send out a couple reminders so everyone gets that marked on their calendar.
I must be absolutely crazy. My thing says curriculum is meeting at 5 o'clock.
Yes, 28th. Yeah, before the business meeting.
Oh, I was thinking these were committees.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Inside your packet, you also have the substitute teacher report. Remember, that's moving from the finance meeting over to the curriculum meeting, so that's there for you to review. Todd can't be with us tonight. We're going to do a little transition with him. So what I can tell you is we have some good news. We have a 98% fill rate for the first time in a long time, so that's very wonderful. And we'll be able to answer some more questions about that when Todd is back. I also have some answers from questions from previous meetings. The first one I wanted to address was the question, it's actually a clarification from the policy meeting about job descriptions. I did go back and check the minutes. At the August 15th Curriculum Committee meeting here, I did talk about the reorganization, and at that time I gave you hard copies of the job descriptions for the 2 directors and the 2 assistant directors of teaching and learning. So I'm happy to provide additional copies of those if anybody is interested in those. But those are created and available. And were available back in August when we made the transition. There was another question about goals. When will goals be discussed in more detail? We are on a cycle to present goals annually. And with regard to some of the specific studies, as you've seen, we are going to be using action plans to lay out the questions that we're going to be addressing through those studies. And then each goal has periodic updates earmarked on our schedule. We do have our topics planned out for the year. So there's opportunities for us to give you updates on the middle school study, on the technology study, time to report out on the sleep and adolescent sleep study, et cetera. So that is the process we're going to be following to keep you up to date with those types of things. There was a question about trips. How is it decided when family funds an athletic trip trip and when the district pays. And I know Mr. Bechtold had mentioned that at the meeting, but I just put it on our Q&A list so that we could remember what that answer was. And it is, if it's a required trip as part of athletic participation, it's funded by the district. If the team makes a decision to go on a voluntary trip, like I think Mr. Bechtold's example is if they decided on spring break they were going to go to a tournament in Hawaii just because they thought that would be a nice thing to do, then the family would fund the trip in that case. Does the district track sports injuries and concussions? We do track sports injuries through our personal trainer. And then we also do collect additional information from parents via the physical forms and the annual medical forms that they turn into the trainer or the coach or whomever's collecting those types of things. Do sports teams still fundraise for trips? I spoke with Mr. Friel, and yes, in fact, some of them do still do that. And then I have a little blurb on concussions in schools. October 10th, there was an article published about the PIAA class action suit where several athletes were trying to hold the PIAA responsible for head injuries they report having experienced while they were playing a sport, and PIAA was trying to get it dismissed, but in fact that case is on track to be heard, and it was not dismissed. It was very refreshing to read the article because when you read the long list of complaints from the athletes and from their attorneys, as I've been going through the different things we do in Radnor with regard to concussions and prevention and things like that, I could sort of check off in my head, we have a fail-safe for that, we have a plan for that, we have a procedure for that. So that was very reassuring. Back in February, I gave you a handout about football. The question came up about football and head injuries, and I did present a little handout that day. I made a second copy of that for you today. And then I also gave you 3 or 4 other pages. One of them is a summary, Curriculum Committee Update, Concussion Precautions, and RTSD. And I gave you all of the different concussion procedures, protocols, and practices in the district kind of in a one-stop shopping. So as you look through that, I won't read the whole thing to you, but, you know, we do have Board Policy 240, which has some precautions in place. As we've talked about before, all the coaches go through a mandatory training annually, both in first aid and specifically around head trauma. All athletes in contact sports do the impact baseline testing and online testing if they have some type of an injury. I was actually going through the coach's handbook, looking at some of the different things that they have in place in there. Wonderful, wonderful document put together by our coaches in the high school, which really spells out these procedures and precautions in a way that made me feel very comfortable. But I gave you one of them there, and that came right out of the handbook, what happens in the event of some type of a head injury. We do have a certified athletic trainer available during practices and games, and the coaches are trained to teach and practice specific ways of play and ways of practicing to prevent head injuries. We do have a health services webpage that Kevin and the school nurses maintain, and I gave you a link to that because they've published quite a few things around head injuries, 2 of which I actually gave you a copy of because I thought they were so interesting. So one of them is this is a whole little quicksand project. Let's start looking at, there's so much out there. The CDC checklist that our nurses use when they have a student that has a head injury, how they make a decision whether to refer them and to make sure that they're checking for all the important characteristics that might be present in a head injury. I also gave you a handout that Kevin uses with the nurses, talking about the role of the school nurse as a person who's screening and referring, because as we know, they don't diagnose their nurses. And I guess that was the last thing. So that packet is there for you to review as part of addressing some of those questions. We had the question about Mandarin. I'm not going to jump on the Mandarin bandwagon right now because in December we're going to hear from the high school with the program of studies, and they're going to be giving us a full report on all of the courses, the status of the courses, what's running, what's not running, what the history's been behind them, and why we've made different decisions along the way with regard to that. So I just made a notation of that. We had a question about our keynote speaker, George Corus, how we evaluated the teacher's reaction to George and his keynote presentation he did on one of the opening days of school. We actually have a very active, we call it the Professional Development Task Force. It's actually our Act 48 committee, but it's kind of more fun to call it the PD Task Force. So we have a PD Task Force made of a group of very creative and energetic teachers who help plan a lot of our professional development. They work on our professional development calendar with us, helped us to select and plan for George's visit. So rather than doing the tired old survey at the end of the session with George, in the afternoon, those teachers in their individual buildings actually helped to facilitate a follow-up activity around innovation where groups of teachers got bags of random items and they did some creative activities. So most of our feedback came from either the principals in the building following up with us about what that feedback was from the teachers and also from the people on our PD task force who I'll actually be meeting with next week because we're working on the keynote speaker for our technology day in February. And then the other question was about the high school. Was the high school following the homework policy guidelines? And yes, they do have those guidelines in place and they do follow our board policies and any administrative regulations that go along with them. And I think I got most of them. I know I had the some of the Narcan questions on my list, but I think Dr. Barczyk answered those at the policy committee, so we should be in good shape with them. And that's it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very comprehensive. All right, public comment. Hi, Judy. Welcome.
Judy Sherry, Governor's Circle, Newtown Square. Just a few loose ends with the minutes. The art collection, which was responded to last meeting, I still would like to know if the administration would post an online description of what is in the art collection for the teachers and public, because what was said is that, you know, we do respond to requests, but if you don't know what actually is there, it's hard to make a request. So that's related to the art collection. I wonder if the committee at some future date will consider addressing booster clubs. That topic's come up in a number of different committees and their role. And because clubs are up for approval, I wondered how do clubs qualify to receive district funding? Some are funded, some are not. And the issue with Mandarin, it seems to me, is not just how are we doing in December at the high school, but what are we doing to encourage students to enroll in the class, and that might take place in the middle school, not just in the high school. And another question I asked before was the value and use of pods in the buildings. How are they being used today? They were considered so important a number of years ago. And before I just briefly go into concussions, both the ELA program audit and the gifted program audit, I guess I just wondered, like for instance in the gifted programming, why isn't the data from the surveys fully displayed in a chart? Because some categories are lumped together in the analysis, like agree and strongly agree. And actually, agree and strongly agree can be kind of different. You know, I can agree with you, but if I strongly agree with you, that may be another item altogether. So that would be my question for those. You know, some strengths for the ELA program. Why would updating material 6 years ago be a strength? It seems like that might be a weakness, but 6 years seems like a long time. And the substitute report, there was another huge jump in absenteeism. September in 2015 was 197. In 2016 it was 266, and this year it was 374. So I'd like to know, why is this happening? What's the additional cost? Because essentially we're paying for two teachers for one spot. We've got a teacher that is our regular teacher that gets paid, and then we pay for a substitute. So I'd like to know what the impact on the budget is. And something I brought up at policy that they said to bring up here is, will the curriculum committee review graduation requirements? These were approved by the board in 2008 when a number of PSBA policies were adopted, and they have not really received another look for a long time. So, and my final comments are related to concussions, which appeared kind of late on the agenda. I just happened to catch it this afternoon. I don't know. I'd like to know what time they were added, because there wasn't much time to prepare. My first question is on the first page, where it says board policy number 240A recalls for the following: informational literature rearing concussions for parents annually. So I don't know what that means, informational literature rearing concussions for parents annually. And just kind of an observation, because, this looks like a fairly comprehensive packet. Most of it seems to me to be information on what to do after the concussion occurs. So here's what our nurses are going to do. Here's a checklist. Here are different things that we're going to watch out for. But, I had gotten up in front of the board. I kind of gave you some quotes, like, it's impossible in a forward colliding, forward leveraging sport to keep your head out of this. This was said by a football historian. This is a collision kill game. The middle school football statement says that coaches teach and stress proper tackling techniques to the players to avoid contact with the head. Well, how do you really do that in a football game? And the concern with helmets, which prevent fractures to the skull, but they don't really prevent concussions, or in addition, subconcussive hits, which are hits that may not reach the level of a concussion, but they've shown to have a very negative impact over time, especially when players start playing football at age 12. So I bring that to the board's attention, and I guess my question really is this. With all this information, what really is new that will realistically prevent concussions and subconcussive hits in football? And shouldn't the administration and the board be keeping track? Now, here we keep track of sports injuries, but do we identify where they occur, what sport they occur? I mean, in the policy meeting, the student representative, I think it was policy, came up on crutches afterwards, and he said he tore one of his muscles, ACL, yeah. He said, and I said, oh, what sport was that? And it was football. But I think that it's important that we really kind of look at sports and try to keep track of where are these injuries occurring, and look to try to prevent them from happening in the first place. So that would be my final comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Hi, Gail.
Hi, guys.
Welcome.
Thank you. I wrote my name over there. Gail Morrison, 111 Poplar. I have I'll try to condense an email I wrote. I can forward it to everybody, so maybe you can redigest, because I tend to ramble and talk a little fast. But I'm here about the ELA audit first and foremost. I find it the report is a little wanting. I wish there was more meat to it. Like Judy just said, the feedback I have seen in the past when we do some of these audits, we pull out some of the pertinent parent survey. Here's what we found in the survey. Here's some examples of parents saying exactly that. I think I would like to see that here. They said I don't know if it's noted that they had 160 parents fill out that survey. That seems like a significant number and something you all should remember. They said that writing was a very chief concern. So that's an example of what I mean. If you heard over and over again that people want a stronger writing program across the board, how did people convey that, and what did they mean? So Secondly, when it talked about the vertical teams, I would like a lot more granularity there on when they met, who met. I mean, I remember in the math audit process, we would have certain teachers that were leaders of the vertical teams come to these meetings and talk about what they did and how their process was to make sure every teacher had a voice within the vertical teams. It's not really clear to me if there was a K-12 ELA meeting so that the high school was interfacing with the middle school. And you remember in the math audit process, they had said, geez, we don't get together that much. So I can't tell if this happened here with ELA. Thirdly, when it mentions sort of the vendors came in, they did their pitch that we should upgrade to such and such. Is that the meat of what this audit process is? Because I don't know that that's sufficient in my mind. I think my expectations are a little bit higher. Are we sure what we're using is the best we can do? Not have the guys come in, bring cupcakes, try to convince you to spend more money with them. That's a different process, right? Because as I started to look at this, and I wrote to Tony Robarczyk about this about a month ago, that I was afraid we were going down a path of everything looks okay, let's re-up, like we did with Everyday Math in 2012. So the key things noting that could be bought again were something called the Center for Collaborative Learning is the publisher of the Making Meaning and Being a Writer programs. They were new when my son was in 5th grade. I remember his teacher did not like them in the least. He was just telling me he remembers not liking it. He was pulled out to do some accelerated work, and he found it so much more rich and interesting, and then he'd go back to Making Meaning, be a little bit bored, and it didn't make sense. So I think that's significant. At the same time, the Fontes and Pinnell work that I watched my daughter do, K-2, didn't fit the bill for me. It didn't meet my expectations. I think it leaves people behind. I heard a term today called a curriculum casualty, where if a child is struggling, this program doesn't serve them, and then by 3rd and 4th grade, they need summer intervention, right? They're behind the 8 ball. So I would like us to really do a more energetic, rigorous audit, looking at what are we doing, does it work? And then I noticed, and obviously I'm not an expert, it's just one parent's view, right? I'm not here to tell the teachers what to do or any of that, but I have pretty big concerns, and I know parents who say, my high schooler can't spell very well. My kid's grammar when he got to college was weak. So I think we have work to do. I really, really do. And so I get back to, I'm not an expert on these things, but I noticed that over the summer when you have to do intervention for kids that have fallen behind already by 3rd grade, they're using, I think, the Wilson program because you have to pay Wilson-trained tutors $45 an hour to work with them. And I don't think that's one-on-one. $45 an hour is a pretty significant amount of money, right? I know that Maureen has said she worked hard to make sure that summer program didn't, bust any budgets, but it's still part of this picture. And if you want to go, I have a couple of data points that I pulled from the 2016-17 PSSA data, and you have 41.8% of your historically underperforming students at RMS not proficient on language arts. That's a very, very high number. That's a lot of kids, right? You have 16.6% of all RMS students not reaching proficient. I think we have some work to do, and what I see here doesn't seem to cover it. I don't know if we're giving it the seriousness it deserves, because I remember when you said there was going to be an ELA audit update this month, and then I pulled down today's agenda, and here we've got, it looks like 40 more things to discuss. How are you going to get through it all? How much time are you going to spend on ELA? And I know this is just common. I should wrap it up. 2 other items. On the substitutes, I won't be here when you get to that part if you get to it today. But a couple people have noted, and I'm noticing, they're really pushing this source for teachers with the yard signs everywhere, with the banners on the website. I noticed that the only other district that uses it is Chester Upland, and I recall that Patty Booker said, we're going to try, last year she said, we'll try this. If it works for us, we could continue it. We don't have to. I'd like to have a better examination of what is the quality of the subs we get I really appreciate the fact that you all took the time to that there was a major problem with subfill, and it seems like you've improved that, but I would like a little more understanding of why Source for Teachers has to advertise, run job fairs. Do we still have a problem that we call people and they won't come sub here? So, and third, on the Rothman study, I just want to quickly say that a single sport athletes at the high school, I would really love to know how many kids of the 1,200 plus kids at the school that affects. One parent guessed that it might be crew and swimming and some of the ones, because I think most of the athletes are multi-sport athletes. But I don't want instruction time taken for all students to do this study. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail. Nice and quickly, Cindy.
Now, that's not fair. I get cut off. I said she's going to cut me off.
So you knew it?
I knew it. Cindy Spurtle.
I'm not cutting you off. I'm just
Wayne.
encouraging you to be speedy.
So I
Sorry.
can't speak at all. Administrative organizational chart. Dr. McGuigan mentioned that the job descriptions were available in August. Are they online? They were made available for the board, not for the public? Or are they available for the public to review? Question. The RTSD gifted programming, the information on the audits was very interesting. And I noticed, skipping ahead, that there are recommendations. And going through the audit, I happen to notice that there appears to be quite a discrepancy in what the teachers agree or strongly agree on versus what the parents agree and strongly agree on. Two of those, one was 85% of the teachers agree or strongly agree that gifted students are academically challenged in their classroom. The parents, 59% of them agree that their children are academically challenged. That's quite a discrepancy in a very important question. And the other one was 83% of teachers agree or strongly agree that they are aware of social and emotional needs, and only 68% of the parents agree that the emotional needs are being met for their gifted children. And I noticed that recommendations are to increase communication with parents of gifted students regarding SDI and student progress. My question is, once again, in going through the audit, the timing for this, because this would, to me, would be very important information to try to answer those questions quickly. In the ELA program, it was noted that the materials were updated for the elementary school 6 years ago, and in the secondary materials were refreshed 6 years ago. I'm sure there's a reason why two different words were used. Does that mean that the materials for if they were only refreshed, that they may be older than 6 years? And is that something that's being addressed in the action items? I noticed there's something new that's happening at the committee level, and that is that there are copies of, or list of the new clubs that are being requested by students in the high school, but no description of the clubs, no copies of the forms that were completed by the students. And the question I had is, has the board been, in order to make a decision as to whether or not they agree that these clubs are beneficial for the students, has the committee been given copies of those, and are copies available for the public in order to review them before they give their approval to push it ahead to the board? And then Dr. McGuigan also addressed the cost of the trips, which is now going to be handled in finance, not curriculum. But the question was, is there a policy on the overnight student trips that you follow, or other than if the students request it versus it was requested by the coach or by the teacher? Not only, you mentioned athletic trips, the question I notice here there's other trips, and the cost to the district, whether or not the district pays or does not, and how much they pay. Is there a policy of any kind on that? And just a quick comment, there have been 2 other comments on the substitute report. Yes, it's great that we have filled the 98%, which is a good percentage. I agree with you. But it appears that over the last 2 years, it's about 90 days difference. Each year, the number of absentees has increased over the last 2 years by almost the same amount. And it's great that we're filling the position, but is there anything being addressed about the fact that the absenteeism is increasing? And also, we're paying for the substitute as well as continuing to pay the teacher, so we've got double costs. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Nice and succinct, thank you. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, everybody. Debbie Singer of Villanova. Cindy went over a couple of the concerns that I had, and I was going to wait for the second public comment, but I wanted to know, Jim, are you doing a presentation at all on this? Okay, great. So I know, so that's why I'll save it. And the other thing is, I think public comment is really important, and I think that when somebody goes over the 4 minutes, you got to tell them, because then it affects the rest of us who want to speak. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie.
Roberta Winters. I would just like to make a comment overall about the audits. I think it's helpful to have people self-examine the programs. It's been my experience in the past when we've had audits, we've had experts from the outside also look at programs, because I think it's very easy to look at yourself and think you're great.
I've never done that, Roberta.
Well, I'm just saying some people have different views. I think it's also challenging that when you having been a part of small groups of people, I mean, I'm small, but this is like, when you're part of a gifted teacher group and there's 7 teachers and they're filling out surveys, it's very intimidating because everybody knows who's answering what question what way.
Right.
So I think you probably need to have better tools to assess real feedback as opposed to what may be appropriate in other people's minds. The other thing I would suggest is as you look at the ELA program, I was just looking at my latest professional magazine, which I still get, and there's some very good information about the difference between comprehension and things between kids who read things online and on paper. And I know we had people from Penn talk about that maybe several years ago, and I want to make sure that we're addressing that as we move our kids in programs to do more online kinds of reading and research, that really does require different kinds of techniques, and those need to be included in our ELA programs. Thank you. I'll be back with more pithy statements.
Thanks, Roberta. All right. I hope we're done, because we have to move on. Approval of the minutes.
Oh, good.
All right, we're good. Agenda item number 1, the PDE comprehensive plan.
And that's just an update to move that to the board agenda.
Okay.
For the full board meeting. We'll be looking for new signatures on the changes in the dates.
Okay. All right. So, number 2? All right, fine. Moving right along, the Rothman study. Welcome. Hi, Dan.
Hello. Good evening. Thank you for letting us speak today. We're here to provide some information about the Rothman study that the high school is interested in looking at. I have with me Mr. Chris Hadley, who is a sports medicine research coordinator for the Rothman Institute. Radnor High School contracts with Rothman to provide training services for athletic events, and they presented this opportunity to us. So at this time, I'll turn the microphone over to Mr. Chris Hadley.
Great. Thank you, Dan.
Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. So what we're looking to do is we are looking to follow freshman students as they enter high school and then follow them throughout and ask them surveys. So we would ask them a brief survey before their freshman year. So if they're a fall athlete, they would get asked in the fall, winter athlete in the winter, and then spring athlete in the spring. However, if they participate in a fall sport and a spring sport, they would only answer the first survey once. They would do it once. We will then also ask them a brief survey at the end of each season to track their injury rates as well. So did they get injured during the season? If so, how much time did they miss? And then at the beginning of the next season, so for example, if a football player plays football, before the next football season, he would answer a brief survey of was he injured within the last 8 months? If so, what injury did he sustain? And things along those lines. So we do cover all injuries. It is left open, so the athlete would fill in what injury they had, whether it be a concussion, whether it be an ACL reconstruction, and do they require surgery or whatnot. And one of the goals to find out is, do we see that a student might start as a multi-sport athlete in the fall of their freshman year, but then by senior year they're down to playing 1 or 2 sports? And if so, have they seen an increase in injury? Have we seen an increase in injury overall as well as a result of that? This study was done, so we do have offices in New Jersey as well as Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. This study was done in New Jersey last year with the Greater Egg School District, and that's why we've decided to move it to Pennsylvania as well. Radnor would be the second school. We do have Upper Dublin that we were doing this with as well. One of the big questions is, what do we do with the data? So the students are never identified in any data that does get presented from this. The students are assigned an ID number, and that is how they are tracked throughout. Their name is not kept with that information. Their name is kept on a secure server. And what we do is we then average the results at the end, and we present those averages. So it's never where a student directly is reported as they had this injury or that injury. One of the big things to point out is this is FERPA and HIPAA compliant. We did make sure that the consent form read that, and we did get compliance with both of those last year.
Okay.
So at this time, I'd like to open it to any questions.
Well, so I don't think I know what are you looking for? Like, what is the question of this research?
So the big thing is we want to see, do single sport athletes sustain more injuries than others? That data has been presented, but it's been loosely presented in the literature right now. One of the big things is, professional baseball, they're seeing what they're calling a Tommy John epidemic for the UCL reconstruction surgery, and that requires an athlete to be out anywhere from a year to a year and a half and miss that participation. One of the big things is, why are we seeing this epidemic, essentially? Are they throwing more pitches? Are they participating in more things year-round? So we are seeing an increase in injuries throughout our practice. However, we want to put that into certain definable terms. So the way we define a single sport specialization is whether the athlete participates in that for 8 months or more out of the year. So for example, you might have an athlete who does play 2 sports. However, by our criteria, they would be a single sport specialization because that would involve sport-specific training as well. So for example, a football player might say, well, I don't play football, I only play it for 3 or 4 months out of the year, when in reality they are doing it more than 3 or 4 months between 7-on-7 camp in the spring and the summer, as well as weight training in the winter. Girls soccer and girls basketball, they might say, oh, well, I only do basketball in the winter. If they do it for those 3 or 4 months, they wouldn't meet our criteria. However, if they play soccer in the fall, summer, and spring, that would be about 9 months out of the year, so they would be defined as a single sport specialization.
Can I ask you, all right, so I have, first of all, a question just about the question you're researching. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that it might be students who do multiple sports that might be subjected to more injury because they might be training for 2 different things at the same time. And so if you're, like, have an ACL injury, weakness, and you're playing soccer and field hockey, you might get injured more than somebody just training for field hockey.
There is that potential, but one of the big things that's come out in the literature is a lot of the key orthopedic surgeons do recommend playing multiple sports for the simple fact of you give other muscle groups a rest. If you're constantly training for that same sport, you're always working those same muscles. So different sports are going to involve different muscles, and you don't even realize it, but subconsciously you are giving those other muscles a rest by taking those seasons off.
Well, I'm thinking of kids who do 2 sports in one season. So they may play travel soccer and play field hockey for their school, for example.
Exactly, and that's one of the things we're looking at. So that was one of the amendments we made.
That would be like overtraining. That's different than what you're saying. That's not cross-training. That could be, you could be doing 4 hours of training a day, 2 in each sport.
You could be.
Are you addressing that?
We are. So what we're doing is we do ask whether they sustain the injury in club sports or the high school sport, because if they did sustain it in a club sport, that might not get reported to the trainer. And that was one of our concerns, is if we're not capturing that, we're not really capturing the full sport specialization aspect.
Right. And who's funding this research?
So it's funded by the Rothman Institute.
And who's funding that?
So it's a private group.
I mean, everyone with an injury going to Rothman.
Patients, in other words.
Patients.
So, I mean, in terms of the funding, essentially is there's nothing. I mean, in terms of who's paid, we are paid employees. I'm a paid employee of Rothman. One of our athletic trainers who's overseeing the main study is a paid employee of Rothman as well. So, in terms of them coming out here or whatnot, I guess that would fall under the Rothman umbrella.
Okay, so you've no
But
corporate sponsor or no
there's no sponsorship.
research
This
sponsor.
is considered academic, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt.
no,
This is
that's what I'm trying to
considered
get at.
academic
Yeah.
research?
Correct.
Okay.
All right.
Would you elaborate with what you're doing with the data? I just heard that you say that you present it when you're done.
No, absolutely. So what we do is we take the averages. So for example, we're going to say we had 200 athletes that participated in 2 sports. They were girls soccer and girls basketball, and we saw an injury increase compared to somebody who just played girls basketball. There was a 20% increase. So we would take the averages and present those with statistical averages as well. So it's never going to be a case of where athlete X sustained an injury over athlete Y.
What I'm asking is, where do you present it? What do you do? Is this scientific presentations you're
It
talking
is.
about?
So we present
Okay.
at annual conferences and
Thank you.
annual meetings, and then we also submit for publication in orthopedic journals.
Have you done anything yet with the data from, is it Little Egg Harbor?
We haven't, because we'll wait until we get the full 4 years of data.
Aside from, it's just nice to contribute to academic research in this area, is there any other reason why Radnor would want to participate?
I mean, one of the big things is you can then, the school would be specifically mentioned within our publication as thank you for your contribution. And also it's great that you can present it to your parents and say we are taking a proactive approach to try and track injury rates and how our athletes are getting injured.
Do you mind if I jump in on there as well? I think it's important for us. I'm the father of 4 boys, and they play a variety of different sports. This is looking at detailed information on, do students that specialize in sports have a leg up, or is it better to play multiple sports? You know, one of the things that that Chris really didn't go into was they're also going to be tracking whether or not students go Division I, II, or III. Are they getting scholarships, and does it essentially pay off to specialize in sports, or is it better for the student's health and well-being to play multiple sports? So there's a variety of different aspects of this. I think that there's no cost to the district. I think it's good information for all parents to have, because I think it can help provide information for parents and students as to what the challenges are that are associated with students that play multiple sports or one sport.
Just one last question. Why Radnor? Why did you ask Radnor?
Well, we do already have the relationship here, being with the athletic trainer and whatnot, so we focused it where it was easier, not to say access, but essentially that relationship was already there, and they would be more open to it as well.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, it sounds as if you will be collecting more finely granular data about injuries than we have in our normal course of business. Is that accurate? Maybe you can answer that, Dan.
That is not accurate.
Not
So
accurate,
The
okay.
only change that with what Rothman does is because they do keep records of our sports injuries for our students. Is the only change would be the students would be getting a survey. That's it.
Oh,
So
okay.
they get a survey when they start a sport, and they get one of those per year. And then at the end of the sports season, they get a survey.
Okay.
And that's it. And it is not during instructional time. It's outside the school day, so it does not impact that. And it's optional. And so parents and students have to sign themselves in. And if they get in and they don't want to participate, they can opt themselves out.
Got it.
I have a question, actually. After you present your primary data, will we have access to the data sets?
Yes.
That's great. Thank
So
you.
you will have access to the averages and whatnot, but you won't have access to individual students
Right.
or anything like that. But the overall averages, absolutely.
Okay.
And one of the other things is if a student does participate their freshman year but do want to pull out, say sophomore year comes and they're like, we don't want to do this anymore, we do pull them out of the study and their data is not collected any further, and the data that was previously collected does not go into our final results.
Okay. All right. Very good. We need to push this to the board, is that correct? Correct. How do you feel about that?
Absolutely.
Lydia?
I personally am not 100% sold on this. It seems to me you're going to get a bias that people are going to answer this or continue to answer this are people that are injured potentially. So
You
anyway,
know-
let me think on this.
I have a question, though, about that question.
Yeah.
Because when I was first reading the survey, I had some questions about the survey questions themselves, and I realized, well, the survey design is not my concern. So are you concerned about the survey design, or are you, if that's what they want to collect, are you worried it's a waste of time for Radnor?
I just have to think on it, because I don't want to tax student athletes any further. So I just have to think on the value of it for them, based on what, you're going to ask them, and what I think is the value of what's going to come out of it. So let me just think on it.
That's fair.
Well, I'm okay. I'm okay with, I think, do you feel by the time we have a board meeting, you'd be in a position to? Okay, so I'm okay with then moving it forward to the full board, and I think that gives Lydia an opportunity to think through your specific concerns.
And
Okay?
can I have one more comment?
Yeah.
So the time commitment for this is 10 minutes for the students estimated for the first survey, which they're given at the first sport they play each year, and then 5 minutes after they complete a sport in that given year. So if you play one sport, if you play just football, it's 10 minutes, and at the end of the football season, it's 5 minutes.
Okay.
And that's after school, Dan, right?
That is correct.
It's not during the school day?
That is
Okay.
correct.
All right.
Yeah, just to be clear, I'm all for information. I mean, I love the idea of getting, the best information. I just
No,
need to
absolutely.
think about what we're
No.
asking people to do. That's all.
We just want to make sure that we stress that we're not taking time out from the school day, and we're going to do it when it's convenient for the sports.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it, and it sounds interesting. And so we'll move it ahead to the full board and proceed from there.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Next agenda item is audit reports. Take it away.
Okay, we're going to invite Mrs. Kevkis up first for theater.
Thank you. Hi, PD. Welcome.
Hi. Is this on? Oh, there we go. Thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate it. We're going to take a look at the theater curriculum audit. I will, do my best to go through it as quickly and efficiently as I can. I know we're a little tight for time. Maureen, if I just move this, there we go. I gotcha. Thank you. So we are in year one of the audit. Moving forward to year two, we'll take a look at the recommendations that came out of this to see what we want to develop. And then year 3 and 4, implementing what we've decided, monitoring, maintaining that, and going back through the cycle to evaluate. So the audit took a really close look. I'm a little too close. The audit took a very close look at the courses offered at Radnor High School. I have to thank Mr. Dietzler, and I also have to thank Dr. Kearney, who was immense help, coming in at the last minute. I recently was assigned this curriculum department, so, he was a great resource for me. So thank you, Jim. And Mr. Dietzler was as well. We use the National Core Art Standards as our guiding force in terms of our curriculum. And there are 4 components to that: creating, performing, presenting, producing, relating, and connecting. We looked at the curriculum that we currently have in place. Small department, but we do have 5 courses currently. Theater Arts, which is a half credit. Theater Arts 2, which is a full credit and an honors course as well. American Musical Theater, which is a half credit. Public Speaking and Communications, which is a fantastic course for students that are interested not just in theater, but also those that want that experience, knowing that that's a very important skill as they go out into the workforce. And then finally, Technical Theater, which is our newest course that takes a look at the different side of theater arts. So our mission statement is to promote personal, artistic student growth, to make sure that they explore their creativity, that they have discipline, professionalism, and certainly that they develop their character in terms of their abilities. So what were the guiding questions that we looked at as we went through the audit? Number 1, what was the current state of thinking in the discipline? So looking outside of Radnor High School, what are other universities and other programs, local programs doing? What are the best practices in the discipline? What are the needs of our students? And then finally, does our curriculum meet those needs? And if it doesn't, what are the recommendations moving forward? Mr. Dietzler did a really wonderful job of looking everywhere and everywhere. He, looked at parent feedback, he looked at student feedback, he looked at alumni feedback. We spoke with, parents one-on-one within the district. We use the standards, obviously, but he also sent out a lot of post-secondary surveys and really examined some local programs. So, for example, he, reached out to professors at Muhlenberg. He reached out to NYU, to Temple, to the University of the Arts, to Juilliard and Pace. He reached out to Conestoga and Great Valley and Garnet Valley and Haverford and LM and Tredyffrin and really covered his bases in terms of the different programs. And then he went out to professional areas and community theaters such as People's Light, the Hedgerow Theater, the Walnut Street Theater, and the Wolf Performing Arts. So it really was a very comprehensive look at the curriculum that we have in place. So what are some of the strengths of the program that we were able to identify? Well, I think given the size of the department, we really do have a nice, diverse course offerings. They're practical, right? They're performance-based. They do a really nice job of achieving a balance between, what an elective should be in terms of rigor and workload, being conscious of what other students have, in their core courses. It's accessible by all students, and one of the greatest things that he's able to do in these courses is to not only differentiate, but to enrich the experience for his students. We took a look at our facilities. So there's 4 main facilities that are really used. We have the auditorium, right, which is obviously a lovely space and has been recently upgraded, and we'll continue to look at that. The black box, a little bit more of an intimate setting. The theater classroom itself, and then the Shakespeare Garden, where the kids can kind of work outside and have that opportunity. So what is some of the current state of thinking in the discipline? That theater experiences should create growth for all students, that it should encompass all different types of art forms, and that's really where our technical theater was kind of born from. That to recognize that many students do suffer from considerable stage fright due to lack of experience on stage. And again, that's where public speaking comes in and the other theater courses as well. The technical training and experience in crafts is really invaluable as they look out into the workforce and explore what possibilities they have. Some of the other considerations that we took a look at was to recognize that we need to continue to provide a greater variety of performance styles and opportunities for our students, that we need to help as they move from the high school to pursue a career in theater, if that's what they so choose, that they learn about professionalism and discipline, about modesty and humility, and the fact that, this is not an easy business, that you're not going to get your starring role necessarily right out of high school or even college, and you may be waitressing for a very long time. So just to teach them that little bit of grit and understanding what the, real path can be sometimes. And being an active observer, not just being focused necessarily on yourself, but looking at the craft from others who are performing as well and seeing what you can learn from your peers. So what are the best practices? Again, to present multiple opportunities and different opportunities for students and for the community, always raising the bar, making sure that we're reaching for excellence, to provide a safe, a warm, and a welcoming environment. The theater room and the Shakespeare Garden is truly a wonderful place where students are always comfortable and feel they have a home. To provide different types of training, to collaborate, and of course, in the day and age that we're in, to make sure that we are teaching students how to promote themselves, how to make your own videos, how to do your recordings, how to create a website for yourself, so looking at the technical side of that again. Some of the needs that we found for our students, to continue exploring performances in front of audiences, to teach them the skill of memorization, which is a big piece in terms of, a role, and to help with anxiety management, to explain to them what professional expectations are out in the world, and instruction and discipline, and instruction in performance for actors, but also for those that are not in the field. And again, that touches to the public speaking course. Technical theater training, has a really nice tie to STEAM. We bring the arts into it. They learn about lighting and set design and all of those different things. So it's a really great course that we have in place. So we're always trying to, in light of that, trying to make cross-curricular connections with other areas, whether that is, preparing a portfolio, reading a play and looking at some work. We try to pull in ELA, different skills, etc. So the question is, do we meet the needs of our students? We do. However, we don't want to ever be complacent. We always want to look to see how we can improve things. So 2 things that came out of the audit, some recommendations were to change the name of 2 of the courses that we currently have in place. So theater arts, moving forward in December when I present the program of studies, will change to theater acting, and theater arts 2 will change to advanced acting. The reasoning behind that being we are addressing performance much more within those courses, almost solely in those courses, and anything outside of that realm, technical arts and stuff like that, is being addressed in technical theater. So it's really not a part of those courses anymore. What we'd like to see over the next couple of years is potentially to develop a course around theater history and expand and diversify performance opportunities. So, some of our students can take theater arts more than once. We want to make sure that if they do choose to do so, that we're differentiating the instruction over a 2-year cycle and that they're learning new things both times that they take the course, as well as in theater arts too. And then finally, expanding performance opportunities such as musical cabaret, continuing to update and renovate our facilities as we can, and exploring opportunities for performances at our elementary and middle school levels. We do have a play at RES. We do have a drama club at Ithan, I believe, and we have a musical that's done every year at the middle school. But it would be great to, let the kids in the elementary schools and the middle schools really see what we do at the high school to engage them and get them excited for when they get there. That's it. Thank you. Any
I have a
questions?
question. I do.
Sure.
I have a big question. And I asked it a year ago. I don't know if you remember. Does this mean you now offer tech ed credit?
It is tech ed credit. Yes, we made that decision over the summer.
Great. Glad to hear it.
I have a question about the sequence. So if you take theater acting, do you have to take that before you take advanced acting?
So you can place into advanced acting. In fact, we have 2 freshmen in it this year. However, it's an audition, by audition only, and you would have to have a recommendation from your teacher.
So around the multiple cycles of the class, you say students take these classes, some students take them more than one time. So it's theoretically, you could take 4 years of an acting curriculum, is that right? Or
Theoretically,
3 years? Or?
I'm not sure that you would take theater arts 4 years in a row, but comparing it to band, you take band all 4 years in high school if you're a band kid. You could take theater arts once or twice, move on to theater arts honors if, you're prepared for that, or you could branch out and look at technical theater or, public speaking. So there's different pathways that you can take, but again, we want to make sure that, if this is the kid's passion, that they can retake those courses and look at the curriculum in different ways and have different opportunities for performances.
Great, thank you.
Do you have to be in these classes to be in any of the productions, the musical or the black box?
Not a requirement.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Anybody else? Anything else? All right.
All right. Well,
Thank
thank you
so
very much.
Vicki. Yeah. All right. Next up.
Thank you. Please. All right, thank you. Okay, next up is the gifted programming audit. Followed the same cycle as academic programs as far as taking a look and step back and taking a holistic look at our programming. But
unlike where it might be in a traditional discipline, we use the word programming instead of program because we don't really have a gifted program. We have a variety of different opportunities that students might experience depending on what their individual needs are. It's not as if students who are identified gifted will have one experience as they go through different grade levels. The core team that took a look at the gifted programming as well as the data that was collected from a variety of sources were primarily the teachers of gifted learners. During our monthly meetings, I meet with the teachers of gifted learners from across the district each month. This is where most of the work was done, although some of it was through individual meetings with different grade levels to deal with specific topics that might be relevant to them but not to everybody else. As part of this process, we drafted a purpose statement for gifted education in Radnor. Purpose of gifted programming in Radnor Township School District is to support the academic and social-emotional needs of gifted and advanced students by providing learning opportunities which are more in-depth and may be presented at a faster pace. Gifted education across the state of Pennsylvania is regulated by Chapter 16 of the school code, and there's a few parts I wanted to highlight here, in part because I think it's good to raise awareness. In some cases, we became aware that there were some misconceptions about gifted ed. One of those primarily revolves around identification. For a child to be identified gifted, they can either have a full-scale IQ of 130, or they might have multiple criteria that strongly indicates gifted ability. So it's not as if a student necessarily needs to hit a quote-unquote magic number of 130 on an IQ test to be identified gifted. They would be identified gifted, but they don't necessarily need that to be identified gifted. At the same time in Pennsylvania, there's a two-prong process for identifying students for gifted. One is, are they gifted? And the second is, do they need specially designed instruction? So that means, do they need something beyond what the regular ed curriculum would provide to them without an intervention of some kind? And if they meet both of those criteria, they're identified gifted, and we write a GIEP, a Gifted Individualized Education Plan for them. Chapter 16 also talks about child find. So as a school district, we've got a responsibility to look for students who may be gifted, even if their parents aren't requesting gifted identification or gifted evaluation for them. Assuming a child's identified gifted, there's a team of people who come together to decide what are their strengths, how do those strengths compare with the regular ed curriculum, and what changes might need to be made in order to help them to achieve and grow, particularly in those areas of strength. And that team includes parents as a co-equal member, in addition to the teacher of gifted learners, classroom teachers, and a representative from the school district. And then the options for gifted programming really take one of two and kind of three broad categories or broad looks. We can enrich the child, so we take a look at the grade level curriculum. What might we do to extend it and go deeper with that grade level curriculum? We can accelerate them through it, or we can accelerate students and enrich the curriculum for them. Now, each of those have complications, and there's a lot involved with both enrichment and acceleration, but it really boils down to those different categories. Best practices around gifted education, here are some in general, are to challenge gifted students in the regular education classroom. The students who are identified gifted, who are maybe high ability, they're gifted all day, every day. They're not gifted just part of a pull-out program, so the idea is that they need regular opportunities to be extended, particularly in those areas of strengths. Acceleration is a best practice. This is one that's heavily supported by research as a means of meeting the needs of students who are identified gifted. Compacting regular education curriculum, where you try to avoid teaching students what they already know by taking a look at what is it they already know and then giving them opportunities to do something else while their classmates might be working through the material that they still have not mastered, but the gifted child or advanced child may have. Flexibly grouping students so they have the opportunity to learn with their intellectual peers in their areas of strength. Specialized programs or classes for gifted students, and making sure that teachers know about the needs of gifted students and educational strategies for supporting those gifted students. So in Radnor, when gifted education went through a bit of an overhaul about 6 or 7 years ago, some of the approaches are highlighted up here. Teacher gifted learners in each of our buildings collaborate, and particularly at the elementary and the middle school level, collaborate with classroom teachers to meet the needs of gifted but also high ability students. The specifically designed instruction that a student might need to be extended beyond what the regular ed curriculum might offer them is primarily going to be provided in the regular education classroom by the classroom teacher with support from the teacher of gifted learners. Teacher of gifted learners might pull students out to supplement what's happening in the classroom, and depending on the needs of individual students, how the students might be configured in the school would really depend on what that looks like. And above grade level work should replace grade level work, the compacting we talked about. But students don't need to be formally identified gifted in order to have extensions or acceleration opportunities. So if we recognize that a student has an academic need in an area, but they don't formally have a GIAP, there's not really going to be very much that's going to be excluded to them. There's no courses that a non-identified student can't get into because they're not identified. There's not services per se that a child's not going to have access to if they have a need for it. The teacher's still going to be meeting those needs, and the teacher gifted learners can still act as a consultant in those cases as well. Gifted identification is a formal diagnostic recognition of a need. It does have a GIAP. Non-identified students wouldn't have that. But as far as meeting the needs of students, we're going to try and do that no matter what the child's designation is. So for the audit, we took a look at a variety of different sources. And again, it was primarily teachers, gifted learners who I worked with to take a look at the information that we got, work with some of these different groups, analyze it, and make some recommendations. But we did try and cast a fairly broad net to get input from a lot of different sources, some of which we haven't really looked at in a formal way before. So administrators were part of this. We looked at assessment results. We sent some of our documents out to a school district solicitor for their feedback. We did a focus group with parents of gifted students. There were about 22 parents who participated in that focus group. We surveyed parents of gifted students. Those things had not been done formally before. We work with Radnor Page. I meet with Radnor Page quarterly, and we have a good relationship with Radnor Page, talking to them about their experiences with gifted ed and what they hear from their members as well. We brought the school psychologists in because they're involved with the gifted identification process, and they made some recommendations for changes there. Certainly teachers, gifted learners, and we surveyed our teachers. The teacher survey included academic teachers, special area teachers, special ed teachers, non-teaching professionals. So the results were primarily classroom teachers, but there were some other people who were involved in that survey as well and did respond to it. So the teacher survey results. As I think was pointed out here, generally speaking, the teachers do feel like the curriculum that we're offering and the needs that the curriculum that we're offering and the differentiated instruction that we're providing does meet the needs of gifted students. But there are some opportunities and some room for improvement in there as well. I don't think we need to go through each one of those. And as was pointed out, we also saw a discrepancy between what the parents said in the survey and what the teachers had said. And in all honesty, a lot of those numbers up there were pretty disappointing to us, but at the same time, we weren't aware of it before, so at least now we know some of those areas where we need to focus our attention. Among those areas that caught our attention in particular was that the 47% of parents, only 47% of parents agree or strongly agree that their child receives or that they're aware of the instruction their child receives to meet the GIP goals, and only 59% of parents agree or strongly agree that the gifted child is academically challenged in school. Looking at the parent comments there for that section of the survey didn't shed a whole lot of light on why that might be. So, it's possible, but hopefully not the case, that the child isn't receiving the instruction that they need, is not academically challenged. It may be, as the parents said and said in the focus group, that they're not aware of what's happening, that the communication is an area that we could improve upon to make sure that the parents know what it is that their child is experiencing in school, specifically around gifted ed. Because formally, it would only be during the GIP meeting that happens once a year that the parents would be updated on the child's progress towards goals, their present levels, and then what the goals will be for the next upcoming school year. And that takes place during a meeting that would last anywhere between about 30, 45, maybe an hour. And that would be about it for the school year, beyond what reports there normally would be from the teacher or any issues that might arise that necessitates the teacher, gifted learners, and the parent talking to each other. So that's something we're going to try and address. Among our areas of strength, we do have a consistent and multifaceted process for identifying gifted students. We look at a variety of different data sources, and as I mentioned, it's not just the IQ test. And we have worked to make this a consistent process across our different schools, particularly at the elementary level where we have 3 different schools and a variety of different people who are involved in it. We've got a variety of K-12 opportunities to enrich the grade level curriculum. One is, in general, we do have a rigorous curriculum. We have a high-quality curriculum in most areas. We do have flexible grouping of students, so gifted students do have opportunities, and high-ability students do have opportunities to work with their intellectual peers. We offer accelerated courses at the middle school. We offer high-level courses at the high school as well, including the integrated courses. which in some cases would serve as gifted programming for students in other districts. We have opportunities for single subject acceleration, whole grade acceleration, if that's what the data shows that a student needs. And the teachers of gifted learners are an important part of supporting our students and our teachers by collaborating with them to meet the needs of gifted and advanced students. And they will work with other specialists as well. Some of the recommendations that came out of this audit were to revise our gifted evaluation process. We definitely wanted to make sure that it's multifaceted, but we did want to streamline it as well, because one of the pieces of feedback we got from teachers and the teachers of gifted learners is that they both wanted more time to work with each other and work with the students. And one of the places where we thought we might be able to find more time is reducing the amount of time spent on gifted evaluations. We want to look at a systematic process for exiting those students from gifted services if they're no longer in need of specially designed instruction. So it's possible that a child's identified gifted in second grade with very specific needs, but as they go into middle school and then into high school and the course offerings that we have at some of our levels, it may be that they don't need specially designed instruction because they can choose from among the different courses and different programming options that we have to get the challenge that would ensure that they're growing. One of the recommendations that came from our school psychologists was to shift the IQ test that we use for the majority of students going through our gifted evaluation process. The WISC-5 is a more current IQ test, although the Stanford Binet 5 is still the most current version of that one, is still legitimate and reliable IQ test. But the WISC-5 came out in 2014. Stanford Binet 5, I think, is 2003. The fourth point is the one that speaks in part to the issues that were raised by parents through the survey and the focus group, increasing communication with parents of gifted students regarding specifically designed instruction and the student progress. And this is something that the teachers of gifted learners have already started working on. Gifted parents should have been contacted by their teacher of gifted learners towards the beginning of the school year to have an introduction, to make sure that they knew who it was that was managing their child's case and would be serving as their teacher of gifted learners. And then at 3 points during the school year, the teacher of gifted learner is also going to make sure at least 3 points in the school, 3 times during the school year, the teacher gifted learner is going to make a point to reach out to the parents specifically about their child. Now, this might take place, one of them would likely be the GIP meeting. It might take place during parent conferences, but it would also be through phone calls and email as necessary. And certainly that communication is not limited to those times and places either. We'd like to develop more gifted programming options that allow for students to explore high-interest, relevant topics that are aligned with our curriculum. These would likely be delivered by the teacher of gifted learners, or at least supported by the teachers of gifted learners in collaboration with the classroom teachers. We've had a decent amount of turnover in our teachers of gifted learners, particularly in particularly at Radnor Elementary School, but then in some other places as well. So we want to orient our new teachers of gifted learners to gifted programming in Radnor, and also provide professional learning opportunities for them and our existing teachers of gifted learners. Excuse me. And we also would like to be more purposeful about some of the professional learning we provide to our regular ed teachers regarding academic and social emotional needs of gifted students. A few years ago, we went around to different faculty meetings and did an overview of some of those topics, and we think it might be time to update that and do something like that again. So thank you very much, and be happy to take some questions you may have.
Julia? Lydia?
You don't happen to know, this is just, I'm curious. So the switch to the WISC-5, are they administering that on Q Global now? Do you know?
I don't know that.
Okay, just curious.
I don't know what Q Global is.
It's the computerized administration of the test rather than paper and pencil.
In that case, they are, yes, because I know they're using their iPads for it.
That's what it is, thanks.
Yeah.
I just have really one question,
Sure.
Jim. Thanks for that. The identification that indicates specially designed instruction is part of the criteria. Do we have that event show up in at least the elementary school and middle school where the answer is no?
That the answer is no, that they don't need specially designed instruction?
So in other words, you have a kid who hurdles the top bullet point, but then there is not a need.
It's very rare.
It's very rare.
The majority of our students are identified in elementary school. A handful of students, a very small handful, may be identified in middle school. It happens, but it doesn't happen very often. We've not had students identified in the high school in the past 10 or so years, at least. So for the most part, if a child meets the gifted criteria at the elementary school, they're likely to be identified gifted and get a GIEP.
Okay.
But it is something that we want to monitor, particularly as they go through the different grade levels, because, as I mentioned earlier, our programming changes, and what's available to a child may not have been available to a child in third grade is available to a child in 9th, 10th, 11th grade.
Right.
And to some extent, in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, depending what their needs are. So it's rare that a child at the elementary level who met the 130 or the multiple criteria would not get a GIEP.
Okay, all right. Thank you. That was, go ahead.
I just want to follow up on that. So what would happen if a parent doesn't want services?
Mm-hmm.
What do we do about that?
Well, if the child's been identified gifted and the parents are no longer in need of services and we were to agree, we would go through a reevaluation process, which is not as extensive as the initial evaluation, and we would exit them from gifted services.
No, what if you feel they do and the parent doesn't want that?
Oh, well, it's unlikely that we would go to due process over something like that, so probably we would exit them from gifted services and monitor it. Yeah, it'd be the same thing. I think we want to be in a lot of communication with the parents about what we're saying, why we think the services are warranted. But I would also say that that's not a situation that's come up either.
Thank you.
Yet. I don't know what you know, but not yet.
I've been around.
Mm-hmm.
All right. If there are no other questions, I guess we'll move on then. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All that is language arts in 11 minutes. So as was mentioned earlier, in looking through the audit, this was a K-12 audit of our English language arts program, which, as you know, includes reading, writing, listening, speaking, phonics, phonemic awareness, everything we do with literature, grammar, vocabulary, etc. So very comprehensive look at our program, but because this audit cycle is a little bit more compact than what we've done in the past, I did focus in the audit report on the so what piece. So you aren't going to see a lot of the facts and figures and numbers behind individual surveys and what people said, but I'm happy to share that data with you if that's of interest to you. The focus here is really the conversations that we had with the teachers as they looked at the data, as they had conversations across grade levels, and we used what I refer to as a problem solution model, where we clustered together all the different problems we saw with the current language arts program from teachers and from parents and from the data, and we really focused on coming up with solutions that would address them. We did do some sweeping changes 6 years ago. I know it sounds like a long time, but we made some huge transitions 6 years ago in language arts, and our intention is not to completely disrupt what we're doing, but to build upon it and make it stronger in every way we possibly can. So I won't refresh the audit cycle, but we are going to be in a develop year this year, so you'll hear more about some other things happening with language arts. When you talk about ELA audit participants, it's almost as though our last audit never ended. When we audited the English language arts curriculum 6 years ago, it was the first audit completed right after we adopted the audit cycle for curriculum. We identified one teacher from every grade level in every elementary building to be part of what we call ELAC, the Elementary Language Arts Committee. That committee also included our librarians periodically, and our literacy team, which is either 5 or 7 people, whether it's elementary or K-12. So that group neared 30 people, and they have been meeting. They started out meeting between 6 and 8 days a year when we adopted the language arts program, and as recently as this year, they met 5 full days in addition to some of their other smaller projects that they worked on in other communications. We do have a K-12 vertical team, and we did meet as a K-12 vertical team. The K-12 vertical team met last spring to help refine the survey questions and identify some of the focus areas. They also met as a K-12 vertical team this past fall, where they worked on vertical alignment, and they had conversations across the different levels about where misconceptions might be, where they believe gaps may have fallen, and what the alignment looks like as students move from grade level to grade level. So that information drove quite a bit of the work we did this year. We also have a literacy team, which meets regularly. That would be our reading specialists and our humanities coaches from each of the buildings. So that's a K-12 team. They meet between 8 and 9 times every year, but they are really the the gatekeepers of the language arts curriculum, the reading curriculum, the support for professional development, and all of those types of things that go on. So many times they do some of the preliminary analysis of the survey data or what's happening in the buildings, and they help to provide more concise and condensed information to the folks on the ELAC team. And then, of course, we have our English departments from each of our buildings. The department at the middle school meets on a fairly regular basis, so it's very easy to spend time with them, as does the department at the high school, which, of course, meets once a month. So we did some work through their department meetings. Some of our data sources, obviously you've seen this list before, are English language arts data across the district. One of the things we did this year was a materials inventory, and what that involved last fall was looking across the most recent publishers across the different IUs to find out, not just what is it school districts are doing for a reading program or an English language arts program, but what they're using for interventions. It's also been a long time, closer to 8 or 9 years since we've updated our interventions in English language arts. So we spent a long time identifying what was out there and what was worth looking at. We did do the teacher survey. We had a focus group just a few weeks ago with 9 parents. The parent survey, I talked about the vertical team meeting. And then we also did, and this was very interesting, data that really helped with a lot of our decision making. We did a special education student survey. And this wasn't talking to the special education students, but it was talking to special education teachers about what does the day look like for your special education students, particularly at the elementary level. Students who have IEPs tend to be very busy, and we say, well, they're very busy during the intervention and enrichment period. How can we possibly get them some help? So we actually put some numbers behind that. How busy are they? Are there days when they're available? When they're not available, what is it that they're doing? We compared different groups of students, and we'll talk a little bit about that, what we learned from that, and that really helped us a lot with our decision making. And then again, the special education program and materials audit. Teacher involvement, I talked about in quite a bit of detail. So the vertical team meetings worked on data analysis and that alignment. The ELAC team, we call them summer retreat days. They met, actually this year, they met K2 and then 3-5. They came in 2 days 1 week and then came back a second week. And again, I said we worked on the problem solution matrix. We did have presentations from Fontes and Pinnell and the Center for the Collaborative Classroom. Our current program is published by DRC, or not DRC, the Developmental Study Center. And they've been renamed the Center for the Collaborative Classroom. So that was one of the places we decided we wanted to look at materials because they were things that we were familiar with and comfortable with. And we also were very involved with the Developmental Study Center in giving them feedback on their programming. And they made a commitment to us to look at their program materials, and as they developed their new additions and their new structures, to consider the feedback from Radnor teachers. And according to them, more than 60% of the feedback they received about their materials came from teachers in Radnor. So they had an opportunity to let us know what types of changes they've made based on that feedback. Fontes and Pinnell also has a new program that was just published in August that people are excited about. Anything with Fontes and Pinnell's name on it, everyone gets excited about it because all of their materials we've bought so far, we just love and get phenomenal results with. So we're very excited to look at that. And then, of course, the department meetings. So as far as curriculum assessment status for the elementary level, we have what's called units of study. Our units of study were created by groups of teachers through our Elementary Language Arts Committee, our ELAC, and the middle school has units. They have common assessments, and then they also have their course overviews and their unit plans for each of their areas. So again, those were some of the focus areas 6 years ago when really our priority at that time was getting everyone on the same page. Making sure that everyone was teaching from the same standards, we were using assessments that were similar, and we had some type of a guaranteed and viable curriculum. So where we are right now at the elementary level, we have units of study based on the Making Meaning program, which is from Developmental Studies Center. We do use the Being a Writer program, which is also from the Developmental Studies Center. Both programs are based on using literature as mentor text to help students emulate life as a reader and life as a writer. We do teach a formal word study program from kindergarten to grade 5. We do use Wilson in K and 1, and Fontes and Pinnell in 2 and 3. And Zahner-Bloger spelling connections in 4 and 5 right now. We have an articulated vocabulary program, and we do still teach handwriting, including cursive. At the secondary level, we have teacher-created course overviews, and we have unit plans that are aligned with the standards. So we don't have any out-of-the-box programming after students reach 6th grade. It's all teacher-created based on the standards. The offerings we have in place right now at the middle school, we have English Language Arts, both accelerated and grade level, and then as you know, in the integrated programs, the English language curriculum is integrated into the integrated programs. So we have the 2 levels. Unless you're in an integrated program, then your English Language Arts is part and parcel of that program. At the middle school, we're also offering some support classes. We offer intensive language arts. One intensive language arts class focuses on students who specifically needs help with decoding, and the other one we target students who specifically need support in the area of comprehension, so we can differentiate. We're still offering the Essentials of Reading class, which was written a long time ago, 11 years ago, and also Essentials of Writing. We do still offer Read 180, and we offer that from grades 4 through the high school, and just recently updated that, so that's available at the middle school. In the English department, again, you'll see this in December when we take a look at the program of studies, but you can see the course progression there. Students start out with either an integrated program, the American Experiment, or literature and composition. Our 3 levels that we're currently offering are the College Prep, Accelerated, and Honors. Same thing in 10th grade. We have global issues, and then you have the 3 levels of world literature. And then 11th grade, students have the opportunity to take a couple different configurations. They can move on to an AP class, they can take an integrated class, which will also support their preparation with AP, or again, they have the 3 levels of American literature available. Very similar in 12th grade, and then we also have a cadre of electives through the English department, and you can see the list of those there as well. Areas of strength. Overall, there is a high level of satisfaction with the K-12 ELA program from our teachers. We heard, more than 80% satisfied, particularly with the reading, slightly lower number with the writing. Same trend with our parents. At the elementary level, much more satisfaction with the literature and those types of pieces, and less when we get into the area of things like writing and grammar and some of those nuts and bolts involved with written language. K-12 did complete the full curriculum cycle, and we do have aligned curriculum documents. Again, that was the focus when we did our audit last time. As I mentioned, the 6 years it may sound old, but we were collecting reading books that were from the late 70s when we moved to the program 6 years ago. So it was all brand new to us. The secondary materials were refreshed, is what we call them, because we have to remember at the middle school and the high school we do a lot of work with classics. So we didn't replace Shakespeare or the Scarlet Letter or things like that, but we did refresh to get a better balance of genre and authors and get a broader scope there. Our common assessments were identified and used. This was a big step for us to move to a point where everyone who taught 10th grade English agreed that they were going to give the same common assessment at different times during the year. So people are comfortable with that. We use them as our SLOs. So they do serve multiple purposes and also give us information on how our students are doing. We do offer summer programming for our elementary students who are reading below grade level. We actually didn't ask a question about summer programming in the parent survey, but many, many, many parents mentioned it. Parents of older students right through the middle school said that it was life-changing for their students, that they've struggled with reading, and after they participated in the summer program, the parents saw a significant improvement in the students' attitudes and performance with reading. So that was great to read. And our students perform at a very high level on both state and national assessments. As was mentioned by Mrs. Morrison earlier, we do have struggles with our historically underperforming group, both with growth and with achievement. And we do believe that through the conversations we had during this audit, that we have some significant plans to make some changes with those in those areas, particularly at the elementary level. Areas of need overall, our intervention materials are dated and do not match current best practices. So when we bought reading intervention materials way back when, 7, 8, 9 years ago, we were really focusing on replacing the core curriculum, because at that time we didn't have a guarantee that if you were in 4th grade at Radnor, you were doing the same thing that you would have been doing in 4th grade at Ithan. So many students in special education were pulled out of the classroom to participate in an intervention program. So we were purchasing interventions that basically replaced the whole language arts block. What we know now from our data is that our students in the district who are pulled out for smaller periods of time during times that are not the core language arts time and do participate in core language arts are demonstrating more growth in the areas of reading. So what that told us is we need interventions that are shorter and more specifically targeted at students' specific areas of need. Parents and teachers expressed concern regarding written language. I mentioned that before. Very common concern and lots of conversations around that already. At the elementary level, teachers find the leveled spelling and vocabulary cumbersome and difficult to manage. Dr. Kearney talked a little bit about acceleration. We had students participating in spelling at a lot of different levels. So if I were a 4th grade teacher, I might have students in a 4th grade book and in a 5th grade book. I might have students in the making meaning vocabulary, and I might also have students in the wordly wise vocabulary. And a teacher might be trying to manage those 4 groups during maybe a 20 to 30 minute slot every day. So the feedback we got from teachers and the conversations we had through our ELAC group was that teachers felt that if they had this, if the spelling addressed the single level skills, meaning the grammar and the conventions that we teach through our spelling program, and they differentiated it, that they felt it would be a richer program for our students. We looked at some materials available through Zaner Blozier, which would streamline their ability to do that, and teachers were excited to talk about that. Teachers also found the elementary program materials cumbersome and difficult to manage. When we purchased our English Language Arts program 6 years ago, it was shortly after the Common Core was just approved, and we found as we started to work with the materials that we had to do a lot of kind of filling in the gaps, and we've provided teachers with a lot of different resources. So, you know, they have the materials for teaching reading, they have materials for writing, they have materials for vocabulary, they have materials for word study, and then they have kind of a binder of extra things that fill in the blanks in between those pieces. And the report from them was that the logistics of it take up quite a bit of time each day. And then again, general concerns about written language, including grammar. We do have a grammar strand in our writing program, but the feeling is that that could be more comprehensive and more integrated into what it is that we do when we teach writing. At the secondary level, there was some interest in refreshing electives such as journalism. As we all know, the way people communicate in writing has changed. We do blogging and all kinds of things like that. So some of the folks at the high school have been investigating some options to journalism, some different ways we can enhance that variety of writing. Teachers of 10th grade college prep and 11th grade honors English have already begun doing some rewrites of their curriculum. It won't be a whole rewrite, but when we developed the 10th grade college prep course a few years ago, it was around the same time that the Keystones were coming out. So our focus was very much on skills. What are all the skills we need to teach in order for students to be successful on the Keystone? And what we found was that students are working on those skills, and as you know, they're doing well on the Keystone. But the feeling was that if the course had a better arc where it felt more connected, that it would be more powerful for our students. And then there's also an interest in updating professional development in the area of written language. We haven't done professional development in writing in our district in probably 14, 15 years. I think Colin's writing was probably the last time we had a systematic approach to professional development as far as writing. We've had little bits and pieces here and there, but there is definitely interest, and we've done had some conversations about partnering with some local universities and really working to identify some resources that would be appropriate for our high school based on the level of rigor where students are writing, and obviously the skill level of our teachers at the high school is very high. So a refresh would be nice there and a welcome addition. So we've put several things in place already, and we have several things in place for the develop year. The first, of course, is to identify professional development opportunities in the area of written language. The second is to align and revise the expectations for written language. So we work a little more tightly around that K-12 alignment. Modify and deliver the delivery model for ELA interventions. So we started this last year, and Wayne Elementary School was very brave and stepped forward and said, we're really interested in doing this, and they really got the ball rolling. As far as how do you restructure your delivery of your services so that all your students, or as many as possible, can participate in your core language arts, and you still are able to use your personnel and the priceless minutes you have during the day to deliver interventions to those students that they need. So we have some great models in the district where it's been successful. We looked at some of those models and tried to emulate them, and again, looked at some intervention materials. And you'll see a list there. We've already updated English language arts intervention materials because they needed to have those materials in place in order to start modifying the model. We did upgrade our Read 180 for grades 4 to 12. We've had Read 180 since before I was here, and when it was originally marketed, it was marketed as a replacement program with a mandatory, you need to have 120 minutes a day, you need to have 100 minutes a day. Well, they've reformatted even their program so it can be delivered in much smaller blocks of time. So that worked perfectly with what we were looking to do. We purchased Wilson Foundations for grades 2 and 3. We only use Wilson Foundations in the core program in K and 1. But our students have had so much success with it. The decision was made that, well, if they're so successful with it in K and 1, why don't we continue that for the students that are still struggling with phonemic awareness and phonics in 2 and 3? So that'll provide a nice continuum for them. Wilson also came out with a new fluency program. So again, finding those great interventions that'll work in short periods of time so that we can really target what students need to work with. Literacy Footprints is a comprehension program that, again, can be used in a short period of time for an intervention for students. The Rewards program is for our upper-level students, again, another intervention program. Our LLI kits from Fontes and Pinnell, the level literacy intervention, is what we've used in our summer program for a long time, since we started. And it's also what our reading specialists use when they work with students for interventions. So we purchased some additional LLI kits so that we could make that intervention available during the day to students again. And, of course, the partnering professional development to go with implementing all of those things. I talked already about spelling, so I won't go into that again. We've upgraded our Fontes and Pinnell benchmark assessment system, which is how we measure students' progress at the elementary level. The new version provides a little bit more of a safeguard for inter-rater reliability, so there isn't as much subjectivity as we're trying to compare students from school to school and growth from year to year when we have different teachers testing. And then as far as the goal of streamlining program materials, I talked a little bit about how teachers talked about how the different pieces of materials were somewhat cumbersome. One of the things we're going to be doing this year is piloting the new edition of Making Meaning and Being a Writer in first grade and second grade because they have updated it and aligned it to the standards and made the pieces more compact than they were before. And then we're really excited about the new Fontes and Pinnell classroom, but we weren't so excited about it that we wanted to write a check for $22,000 a classroom because no one's actually ever seen it. So there are 2 or 3 schools in the state of Pennsylvania who have purchased some of it, so our plan is to wait and see what happens with it and take a site visit to one of those locations to see how it's working for somebody else. And at the secondary level, I've already talked about the college prep, looking at journalism and professional development for writing. And then as far as financial implications, we had some money set aside this year for those remediation programs, updating those interventions. We had some curriculum development money set aside. If we go forward with a new program adoption, it would probably be a phase-in model, but we would be looking at some financial implications there. And of course, the related professional development, including professional development in written language. Is that fast? Thank you.
I'm good. Yay! Leaving me holding the bag.
No pressure.
So if you could just review one little, the concern about written language concerns me personally greatly. I mean, it's just fundamental to everything that anyone will do once, while they're in school and thereafter. So we have not had professional development. Did I hear correctly? We have not had any professional development in written language instruction in 15 years.
Well, we had professional development when we adopted our writing program, obviously at the elementary level. But as far as looking at written language K to 12, what do we believe about writing? What do we believe that students should be writing, from K to 12? There have been a lot of shifts with written language. Most of us remember writing 5-paragraph essay after 5-paragraph essay when we were in school. And, there's a lot of research now about different forms of writing, about collecting ideas, about creating the thinking skills behind writing. So we do need to take some time to take a look at those things.
Okay, so grammar seemed to get kind of a general concerns about written language, including grammar, and off we went to something else. What are we doing with grammar?
Grammar we'll do as part of written language.
Part of written language. When do we actually teach English language grammar?
When do we teach grammar?
Yeah.
Well, we teach it in the elementary level. Students have a grammar book that's part of their written language program, but it's kind of a standalone that's not really integrated into, right now we're writing sensory stories, so we're going to work on, adding adjectives or whatever it is. It's not as integrated into the program as we would like, which is one of the reasons why we're looking at the new one. And at the middle school, the students have a grammar book. We don't open it up the first page and fill out every page in the book, but teachers do use it if they want to teach there, and there, and where, and prepositional phrases, and teachers pick and choose from those activities.
Okay. 'Cause I think that one of the problems with grammar from just my own observations and struggling with my kids while they were going through school. Look, it's not really exciting. Let's just face it. I think it's kind of exciting, but most people don't. And so I worry that because it's not exciting, it's given short shrift. And I would really hope that whatever we do as educators, part of it has to be, some of this is not going to knock your socks off, but it's important, and it's important to learn, and we'll do our best to teach it in a way that's engaging, but we will teach it. And I hope that mindset happens as we're going through this, because I personally I've been listening to complaints about grammar since my kids were in school. They're now out, and I'm still hearing we've got complaints about writing, and we're not where we need to be. At some point, we have to sit down and say, we are going to get where we need to be, and I would hope that it will be, through this upcoming process. I think reading it sounds like you've got reading on certainly for those who need additional assistance, that seems to be pretty well covered, but I feel like writing, which is really for everyone, there needs to be an emphasis there that I still feel I didn't quite get that sort of, here's where we're going, charge on with that piece. So I'd like to see more of that. And other than that, given that it's 7:15 and I got the next meeting, I'm done.
Thank you very much.
But thank you. That was very comprehensive. Okay. So I've lost, good grief, where are we? We're up to the board agenda items, is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
so
thanks.
in your packet, you have a list of clubs, which will be appearing on the board business meeting agenda, along with the descriptive sheets submitted by the students. And then we also have a couple overnight trips that are also in your packet.
Okay, so clubs, Amnesty International, Books for Beliefs, Combating Crohn's, It Takes a Village, Melting Pot Theater, Rad Dance, Radnor Business Majors, Radnor Glamour, Radnor High School Chapter of Junior State of America. What's that?
Radnor High School Junior State of America.
Yeah.
Let me tell you. I know.
We looked it up.
A lot of
Nobody
them
knew
are-
what that was. Is this
No,
something, is it just some,
This organization is being formed to provide students with an opportunity to discuss and debate politics and political ideas. Students who participate will gain a greater understanding of relevant political issues and political thought. And Mr. Miller is the sponsor.
Todd Miller?
Yes.
All right, okay. Radnor for,
The Radnor Glamour?
Yeah, I was going to say, you glossed right over that one.
Radnor Glamour?
I know it
This
is.
is my
sorry.
favorite one. So it's
Well, that's why you're here.
It's a group of students who will actually be traveling to nursing homes and doing makeovers for senior citizens.
Nursing homes,
I think
makeovers.
I'm pretty sure
That
that's
is
what it-
sweet.
I
love
know, isn't it
that.
nice?
I love that. I love that. Radnor Photography Club, Radnor Young Activists. What are we activisting for?
Radnor Young activists plan to organize students to attend marches and other forms of peaceful protests to advocate for progression without the restraint of definitive political party affiliation. They will engage Republicans, Democrats, and independently affiliated students with leadership opportunities and encourage students as young adults to find their voice. And their club sponsor is going to be Mrs. Pearsall.
Okay, and Sea Perch.
Sea Perch
Is that a
we have at
technical
the middle school as part of the integrated program in Gateways. This will be a similar competitive club that will be a club outside of the school day.
And then finally, Technical Theater.
Technical theater, I believe, is Mr. Dietz.
Okay, never mind, I know what that is.
Yes.
Okay. FBLA, I know what that is, intramural floor hockey, and service club. Fine, okay. All right, if we're going to look at them, I think we need to look at them. And then the school trips,
Those are our usual suspects.
Poconos for FBLA.
And two Model Congress.
Okay. I know Model Congress.
And then the clubs from the middle school are continuing clubs.
Okay.
FBLA, floor hockey, and service club.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. We okay with all that?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
We had something. So you just want to make
Oh, go right ahead.
For the Model Congress, Harvard, I'm doing that, and I'm almost positive it's $5.95, not $4.92.
The price?
Yeah,
Let's check.
It's $5.95?
want to say it's something. Yeah, it's definitely not $4.92.
Okay.
It's not $4.92.
Oh, I'm pretty sure it's $5.95, not $4.92 for the Harvard Model Congress.
Yeah, and when they submit these forms, these are estimated costs, so sometimes they do change. A lot of times they use the money from the pricing from last year, and when they call hotels and things, it changes a little bit. So, yeah, it is down as $4.95. But it does say here, these numbers are estimates, and they're based on 2016, 2017. So they may have some, probably another new hotel tax.
Do you know, is it the same for the Princeton one, or is that a?
The Princeton one is accurate.
That's
what it
accurate,
is,
okay.
yeah.
All right, great, thank you. Figure that, but yeah, if we can get that correct for the board meeting, that would be great.
Thank you.
Okay, we are 20 minutes over. We have another hour and a half meeting after this. Unless there is, I will entertain public comment, but I would ask you to please be brief and do not repeat what's already been said. Come on up, Debbie.
Okay, I will be really quick. Just a couple of things. I don't think parents are aware that they can ask for a meeting other than when their scheduled GIEP is, because we get a lot of questions about that. I wanted to know how often the teachers of the gifted meet with the classroom teacher. Wanted to know if the students could be surveyed, the gifted students could be surveyed. And I know we'll go over a lot of this with you, Jim, at our meeting. The other thing is that I wasn't going to bring up, I know I spoke to you about it, but given the arts, I'm an arts advocate in general and music in particular, I think that while keeping our facilities up to date, we need to keep our instruments up to date. The middle school piano, beautiful 100-year-old Steinway, needs what's called voicing. Hasn't ever been done. It needs to be done every 3 years. It's an $1,800 repair. you know, and I know Maureen is going to put it on the budget for next year, but I had mentioned it this past May that it needed to be done. We had two piano teachers, Juilliard grad, Curtis grad, said needs to be voiced. That's tone. That has to do with tone. Tuning doesn't do it. So the district guy that you use can do it for $1,800. So, you know, I know you keep the sports stuff up to date, mats and things. So instruments are as important. Thank you.
I'm good with that. Thanks, Debbie. Hi, Rick. Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Thanks. Sorry to be so late and keep you here. I got things to do, too. I wanted to speak in support of the Rothman study that's been proposed. I'm sorry Lydia had to leave because she raised some really good points. And as a lot of you know, I've been researching and writing about youth sports for a long time, and one of the things that got me interested in it in the first place was the rash of injuries that were coming in the last 10 to 20 years, especially among girls, but not limited to girls. The bigger issue is, Lydia's right, it's not just about single sport. The bigger issue is overuse, of which single sport specialization is just one piece. So I don't know if it's possible, Dan, I have no idea if it's possible to add just a couple of quick supplemental questions about the hours per week that our students spend playing sport both inside school and out of school to get a better picture of the time they're spending and the lack of recovery and the lack of rest, which is bigger than specialization, but certainly part of it. I mean, Olivia will bear me out on this. The girls' soccer team has had 4 games in the last 8 days, 3 of them on turf. And to watch 15, 16, 17-year-old girls walk off the field with ice all over their bodies, wasting good ice that could be used for other things, it's kind of sad, and it's overuse. And it's not Dan's fault. It's not Mike Frill's fault. We're trying to juggle all these teams and all these leagues, but if you know anything about college sports, these intense sports, you never play more than 2 games in a week, never. And at the World Cup level, maybe every 5 days you play a game. But we've got high school girls who are playing soccer 4 times in 8 days, and it hurts, and they don't have enough time to recover. This program happens to have a very enlightened coach who gives time off and downtime between games, but not all coaches are that enlightened. So the data that are collected from this Rothman study, especially if there are a couple more questions, can help us educate parents, it can help us educate coaches, and it might be able to influence policies that will benefit the kids in the long run by hopefully cutting down on these situations where you're probably pretty tired right now, aren't you? Yeah. You're ready to fall asleep. So I think it's a positive thing, and Radnor should get ahead of the curve on this, and we'll be able to maybe be part of the best practices once they get established.
Thank you so much. That was, I'm glad glad you came forward. That was worthwhile. Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Susan Stern, Wayne. I have 3 quick comments. Echoing Debbie Singer's comment, I think that it's really important whenever we do an audit to be surveying students, particularly middle and high school students. I noticed that the theater arts program went to a lot of effort to survey those students, but we did not, at least from what I could tell, we didn't audit and survey students for ELA or for gifted. And I have believed for a long time that the student's perspective is really important, particularly at the secondary level. With regard to one of the findings for the gifted survey, and I would extend this to all students, but with regard to the best practice of trying to reduce repetition of previously mastered material. Last year we passed a homework policy, and recently the AR was put into place. And I waited until the AR was put into place to say that as a parent and as a school board member, and I will say as both, I strongly object to homework being graded at the high school. With regard specifically to gifted students, I can say not all students need to do homework to master the work. But all students, we can recognize that on an individual basis, students may not need to do homework to understand the material and to master the work. And so to penalize them with homework that's graded, that will, if they don't do it, it will impact their grade, and they may not need to do it in order to understand the material, particularly with an AP course, pass an exam, get a 5 on the AP exam. I feel that we are penalizing them. And so not only do we have homework graded at the high school, we don't even have a limit at the high school AR on how much homework can be counted toward a grade. And I just feel like that is just very unfair to students. So those were my 2 comments. The third thing is I'm really glad to hear about some of the expansion of the tech ed and the art department, and I think the more opportunities we give the high school students, maybe through the class, to be involved in set design and staging of our productions at the high school, they'll really gain valuable opportunities and experience. So that's it.
Thank you. Hi, Roberta.
Hi, I just wanted to speak about the gifted evaluation for a minute, and I would hope that you would look at targeted intervention in the gifted program just as you look at targeted intervention at the other ends of special education. I think you need to perhaps, while you mention the issue of gifted turnover, teachers of the gifted turning over, you might ask questions about why. You might also consider having part of the induction program looking at gifted education when you do that for new teachers coming in. You might also want to look at underachieving gifted, which was not mentioned. You may also want to consider whether or not you need to have report cards for the gifted students, just like you have at the same time they get their regular report cards, so that there's better communication between parents and teachers and they know what's going on. You might also want to look at I know you have social emotional needs there, and I think when we look at the strengths of gifted students, we also need to look at the other. They also have needs which are a source of sometimes frustration, and sometimes I did not hear any mention in both of the reports today about the kids who are dually identified in terms of gifted and special education and the kinds of supports they need, because I think that's a very different animal. You might also want to look at writing across the curriculum, just like you used to look at reading across the curriculum. And that's very important as you look at the need for writing to look at class size issues, because that kind of writing support by professional educators needs to be done in a more intense way than just a particular impacts other fields. And also, in the past, if you go back to the future, there used to be readers in some of the content areas that could actually read and grade papers and look at things that classroom teachers may be overwhelmed with. Thank you.
Thanks, Roberta. I hope it's short in finance.
We're going to have a real short finance meeting. Quick question on what was presented this evening. On the theater audit, which was very interesting to me, there was a mention of the STEAM program, and a couple months ago I had asked, based on the STEAM program for the summer, whether or not STEM would be expanded to include the arts. I still haven't received an answer to that question, so I'll bring it up again since it was mentioned in the theater audit. Also, something jumped out at me that I was wondering if Radnor Elementary had representation on the gifted audit team. It was not listed. And so, and also, as was expressed by Susan, the concern for grammar and the importance of grammar. I remember, if I remember correctly, 2, maybe 3 years ago, and the recommendation of students of the universities that our students are going to, that Radnor needed to work on its grammar program, and it was my understanding that new books were purchased. I don't know whether those are books for early elementary or for high school students, and it seems that there still needs a lot more work needs to be done on that. And one other thing on the information that was added just at the end of today on the concussion. The one point that I would like to bring up again is whether or not there are any talks or any committees being formed addressing some of the concerns that have been expressed by township residents about tackle football for the middle school, and experts in the field that express concern, since the brain is still in development, early development in 11 and 12-year-olds, whether or not this is something that Radnor we'll look at. I don't believe there's been an answer to that question either. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.